History of magical
Magical
tools
tools.
from ancient times to the present. Uh-oh.
There we go.
Phew. I thought the mouse had frozen again. Right. Obviously, we've been introduced. You know who we are.
Yeah, I know who I am.
I know who I am.
Okay, good.
That's him. That's me.
Yes.
There we are.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Question is, what is a tool? Well, a tool enables you to do something that would be difficult or impossible to do with your hands alone. As a demonstration, I've got this nail here, and I'm going to use my hand, and I'm going to drive this nail into the tabletop.
Right, that's my desk.
Oh, sorry. That wouldn't work very well. I'd probably hurt my hand. However, a small hammer like this and the nail, I would be able to bang that nail right into the tabletop, which I won't do right now because, as she said, that's her desk. Another thing, back scratcher. There's a spot in the back of my back that I can't reach. This is a good tool. Trust me, that's a good tool.
It is a good tool.
All right, so we use tools to shape and modify things in our environment because they make the job easier. Now, those are practical tools. Now, over to Yvonne for magical tools.
So, what we're defining as a magical tool here is any tool that's primarily used to bring about a magical effect. So obviously, some tools have a practical use they exert an effect on the physical world, but they also have a magical use as well. So, for example, the broom has a dual function, right? Now, it's when you use a magical tool, you're bringing about a magical transformation, and it's effective because of some quality of the tool. It can be both practical and magical, or it can just be magical, but most of the time they have a dual function. And obviously they are used in magical rituals. So why do we use magical tools? So, well, the first answer would be that humans are tool-using animals. We're not the only tool-using animals, but we are particularly good at tool use. And the interesting thing about a tool is that there's a mental process that goes on when you decide to use something as a tool. So, for example, if you think about a chimpanzee goes to an anthill and it's sitting by the anthill and it's going, I can't get my hand into the anthill to get the ants in there. But then it remembers that last week it saw a straw or a reed, and then it figures out that, oh, that would be a great tool for sticking into the anthill and sucking the ants up through the straw. So as you can see, that involves not only I remember having seen that thing over there, but also a concept of repurposing that object as a tool to get to the achieved desired end. Another example would be birds smashing snails against rocks to get the juicy snail out from the middle of the shell. And crows are very well known for using tools. So I would argue that the magical tool enables us to do something in a way that is more effective than if you were just using your bare hands or trying to use your mind. So, for example, when you're sweeping the circle, if I stand in the middle of my magical circle and I go, right, I am mentally banishing all the unwanted influences and thoughts that might be hanging around, that's one thing, and you need to be doing that as well as your physical sweeping. But if you're physically sweeping, then as you sweep, you can be mentally clearing the space as well. And the sweeping acts as a sort of sympathetic magic to convince you that you've really swept the unwanted influences away. So obviously that means that the tool fits the task. And the other thing that's important in a magical tool is the properties of the material that it's made of. So some materials seem to be better for transmitting energy through than other materials. And also the fair folk don't like iron. So if you're going to be working with the fair folk, don't use iron or steel because they don't like it. I believe that antler is actually a medium for storing energy. I don't think it transmits energy. Here I've got a single tine antler here, which I'll hold in the middle there. I know it's difficult. There we go. Single tine antler. I'll just, oh, hang on. I'll hold it a bit nearer. There. I find it very useful as a tool for healing. Anyway, we'll talk a bit more about that later. And the other thing that's really important about magical tools is their symbolism, because the symbolism helps us to connect to the unconscious, because the unconscious primarily works with symbols and metaphor and rhyme and color and shape, and that, you know, we call the unconscious or the younger self, and it basically operates in symbols. So using tools helps to activate that side of the mind, and that's the side of the mind that we primarily use in magic. Oh yes, thank you. So you might be wondering what this is. Does anyone know what it is? Probably, actually, I've got some text on there that says, so never mind. It's a fire bow. It's a fire bow. So you have the thing here, and then you whiz the pole in the middle, back and forth with the string, and then it makes a spark, and then you can start your fire. So it's a very ancient tool. And talking of ancient tools, over to Bob for prehistoric.
Who are you calling it ancient? Right, on that happy note, prehistory. I'm going to look at prehistory now. We can look at the images on the screen. So the oldest tools that have been found in archaeological digs by humans or proto-humans date back 3.3 million years. And what do you think they were? Knives. Knives and blades.
Knives.
Yes, I'm sure that there were also stones used as tools, but it's hard to tell a stone from a tool stone. So these knives, they were probably used for hunting or for survival. And then about 100,000 years ago, we start seeing evidence of a more creative side of people developing. Tools for painting, for artistic rendering. This is when you see the cave paintings where they put their hand up and then they spray ochre and they leave a handprint on the wall. Excuse me. And following that, about 40 to 50,000 years ago, we start seeing evidence of musical instruments, generally hollowed out bones carved with little holes put in them, and artistic carvings. So we start seeing representative art, the Venus figures, or the Lion Man, both of which were found in Germany. Now the mask on this screen, see if I can, right there, which is at the British Museum, it's about 10,000 years old, and it seems to show a ceremonial tool, likely used in ritual. Now the archaeologists feel that it was likely used as a tool to give the wearer luck in a hunt, or perhaps as a way of communing with the animal or animal spirits. Now, closer to the present, we find more and more evidence of goods being buried with the dead. This shows a strong sense of ceremonial religious practices becoming a part of daily lives. These things include masks, swords, axes, gold, and jewels, all of which they found during excavations, which show the status of the body in life and what was important to them while they were living. On the left, there, we have lunar calendars, which were unearthed near Rome and were used for tracking the days of the lunar month. So over time, you can see that practical tools began to take on a variety of practical, well, yes, and ceremonial meanings for those who used them.
Okay, so what we can see from this assemblage is that so they're measuring time, presumably for ritual purposes, so that's your lunar calendar. They're burying goods with the dead, which suggests that they believe in an afterlife, because there's no point in burying goods with the dead unless they think the dead are going to be able to use the things in the afterlife. They have some form of ceremony involving status, because that's what the ceremonial axes are about, and their rituals are involving some form of disguise, either as a god or an animal, or maybe the god of the hunt or the animal that they're trying to hunt, in using masks. So you can see some quite obviously very sophisticated ideas from on the basis of these tools that they're using. And we showed an illustration of one of these antler masks in use earlier, so here it is again. You can see that is the same, that this is an illustration based on that mask.
And being at the British Museum, I've noticed that everybody who posts a picture of it, they stand at one side of the glass case and they put their friend or the other person at the other side and line it up so it looks like they're wearing the mask.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We've got a picture of Bob doing that in the British Museum. Yes. So here we go. Right, ancient Egypt, that's me. Okay, so ancient Egypt took the art of burying interesting things with the dead to new heights or depths, and the whole of the culture of ancient Egypt was kind of focused on having a good death and making sure that when you got to the afterlife you were properly prepared to go through all the elaborate ceremonial that you were assumed to need the other side of death. So one of the key things to note about ancient Egyptian religion is that they didn't really distinguish between magic and religion. This was mentioned by Ronald Houghton in one of his talks at Witchfest. And this unification of magic and religion means that a lot of the ceremonial magic that we've inherited in the Western mystery tradition comes ultimately from ancient Egypt. So one of their key rituals was this ritual called the opening of the mouth, and what that was about was that when the mummified deceased person obviously has all the bandages all over their body, including their face, and the opening of the mouth ritual was to enable them to speak and breathe in the world of the dead. So in order to do this, there were 75 different steps to this ritual, and they all had different aspects. And interestingly, it turns out that it's possible that one of the Psalms, I think it was Psalm 75, was actually based on this ritual. So, and because obviously the ancient Hebrews came out of Egypt rather famously. Anyway, this ritual involved various different magical tools, a mace, a dagger, an iron tool. I won't attempt to pronounce the Egyptian, a birthing blade, the making firm the mouth tool, and whatever the great tool of enchantments was. But you can see that once again we have a dagger and a blade, and these little stone examples on the right are a later sort of symbolic version of those tools. So obviously they also buried grave goods with the dead because they believed that they would be able to use them in the afterlife. They had a lot of various musical instruments, including the sistrum, which we still use, various magical staffs, incense burners, of course, jars for pouring libations, and canopic jars, which were used for, they took out the organs from the corpse of the deceased person and put them in the canopic jars. And there was one jar for each of the various deities, and I think they guarded the cardinal directions. So you can see some themes developing here which we might recognize from modern magic.
Okay, now we have ancient Greece. Now I remember from my university studies, I took 3 different courses in ancient Greece, that one of the things that you would have in your house would be an altar to your personal deity, quite often one of the house or the hearth. And then your community would also have a shrine to the community deity. So it became, well, it was just part of daily life. You would make your offering in the morning, or you would have make an offering at dinner time. So they would have altars to their patron deities. And at this time, tools and magic began to take on a more personal nature. It would be, you'd ask questions like, what can I do to help my crops grow? And how can I keep the plague that is ravaging the area away from my house? And I need to find a wife or a husband. How can I do that? Or how can I enchant this person to approach me? Or I need some sort of a curse to annoy my neighbor. Come in handy some days. Magic and tools were becoming a part of daily life. Tools to bring luck or love would be talisman. Tools to repel bad luck would be amulets. That's how you can remember the difference between amulet away. So amulet pushes bad luck away. There was also divination for telling the future and for finding the cause of problems. There have been references to the Sieve and Shears method of divination, which was even written up in that time period. The only thing is that it's never explained how it worked. And people have come up with various different theories, which I believe you've come up with a theory on how it works. I fancy that.
Yes. Okay.
So let's see if we can come up with an idea. And if you come up with any ideas, maybe we could discuss them later on.
Yes. Okay. Well, before we get to my theory about the Sieve and Shears, we have the Wryneck, also known as the bull roarer. We actually tried to make one of these earlier today and failed. Because we were going to demonstrate it. But anyway, it's basically, if you think of a piece of string, the original one was apparently a sphere made of lapis lazuli encased in a gold sphere. And
we ran out of lapis lazuli.
We did,
and
yeah,
gold.
Yeah. Anyway, you whiz this thing around your head and it goes wee, 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 and it makes very high pitched noise and yes, and it sounds like spirits or something. So these are various cultures all around the world have these, and they're also known as bull roarers. But the reason the Greek one was called a Wryneck was because it sounded like the cry of the bird known as a Wryneck. Anyway, so on to my theory about the Sieve and Shears. There have been various theories advanced as to how this worked, and this is mine. So first of all, my animation didn't work. That's blooming annoying. Right, so the idea is that you have the sieve, right, and then here we have some shears, and let me see if there we go. So the shears would spin, and you have to imagine them spinning in a flat plane, but I couldn't get the animation to do that. So they spin around, and eventually they point at the guilty party. Oh, look, it's Emlyn.
No surprise there.
Yes. And well, according to the other blade, it's actually me. So there you go.
It's between the two blades, so you have a focus like
it's you then.
Me?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Yeah, we can be co-conspirators. Anyway, so basically, I think the idea was that you put the sieve down and then you spin the shears around on it, and when the spinning stops, then you get hopefully points to the guilty party that stole whatever it was.
Sounds like an ancient version of spin the bottle.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Anyway, so that's my theory of how the Sieve and Shears work. And if you Google Sieve and Shears, you can see a conjectural drawing from New England in the 1700s, and like that, it's just bizarre. So I think my theory is better. Anyway, that is my theory. You heard it here first. So let's talk about ancient Rome. Everybody likes ancient Rome. Right, so the ancient Romans got a lot of their magic and religion from the ancient Etruscans and also the ancient Greeks, because the bottom half of Italy was settled by ancient Greeks, and indeed a lot of the Mediterranean seaboard of France was, like Marseille was originally a Greek colony when the Greeks had an empire which was like quite a long time before the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. So one of the things that the Romans liked to do was augury, which was deriving omens from birds, from the flight of birds and from the behavior of birds. So if you look at this picture on the left, you can see there's a bird pecking on the ground. So sometimes they would scatter seed around, and then they would try to do the divination based on where the birds pecked the seed. But the most famous version of augury is where they basically cast a circle around with their lituus, which is this sort of funny looking tool here, and then they would interpret the omens from the birds flying into or out of the circle that they'd marked out. And you might recognize the shape of that lituus, because it's from that tool the bishop's crozier was derived. That is why a bishop's crozier has that squirrely thing on top.
Yeah.
Another thing that the Romans did was they were very keen on protective amulets. I think just about every culture that we've looked at in this had some form of protective amulet. And the Roman ones were called bulla, and this is an example of a bulla. That's very pretty. Now, I believe that this is where we get the expression the papal bull, because the scroll that the papal edict was written on was then sealed, and it had something similar to this appended to the seal, so that's why it was called a papal bull,
to protect the seal of magic.
Well, maybe.
Edict.
Yeah. They also used curse tablets, which in Latin were defictiones, and what they did was they wrote, "Dear deity, please let this person who stole my purse be cursed forevermore, blah blah blah," and then they would fold the lead curse tablet up and chuck it into a sacred well. So there are loads of these in the Roman baths in Bath. And the other thing, as you can see, the Romans really keen on divination. I guess if you've got an empire to run, then you want to know what's going to happen next. They also practiced haruspicy, which they got from the Etruscans as well. And haruspicy is the interpretation of entrails and the liver. So they would sacrifice an animal, cut it open, and then they would look at the liver and the entrails. And they also had, there was like a stone map of what the liver looks like, with each region marked out, and if there was a flaw or some sort of mark on that region of the liver, then that meant a particular omen based on the liver. Anyway, I don't recommend trying this at home, mostly because liver tastes nasty. So there you go. I think that's it for that one.
Okay.
Yes.
And on to me, Jewish magic. Now, this could be a very big topic, but I will try to keep to just the key points. So much of Jewish life, both ancient Jewish and modern, revolves around knowledge of the presence of God and reminders of that relationship between self and deity. There was also a strong belief in the magical power of words. Now, the two images shown here, one is an incantation bowl, right here. This was used to trap unwanted spirits using the power of words and prayers. And you would have that and then put it upside down at some relevant point, and it would trap that spirit, and it wouldn't be able to escape because of the prayer written inside the bowl. And the second image over here is a mezuzah, which is normally found at the threshold of a house or a room. And it contains a specific or a general prayer, and it is often touched as one crosses through the threshold. Reach up, touch the mezuzah, and their prayer is passed on to you. And though it's not shown here, the tefillin are small leather boxes containing lines of scripture that are worn on the head and on the arm during morning prayers. And they're used to combine both the spoken and the written word. So you get double power from the prayers. And the other one mentioned here are the Urim and Thummim, which were ancient breastplates which contained stones, 12 stones, each representing the tribes of Israel, as well as the 3 patriarchs. And they were used by ancient rabbis for invocation and oracular purposes. Normally only the leader could request the rabbis to do it, the king or whoever was in charge. And you wanted to say something about the golem.
I did. So the golem was a magical being made of clay, and the most famous golem, although I think there have been other ones, was the golem of Prague, and it was made by Rabbi Judah Löw, or Judah the Lion, who operated out of the old new synagogue in Prague, which is the oldest synagogue in Prague. And he made the golem at a time when there was lots of pogroms and the Jews were being persecuted, and the idea of the golem was to protect the Jewish community from the murderous Christians. You could activate the golem by writing the Hebrew word truth on its forehead, and then you could deactivate it by erasing the word from its forehead. Now, legend has it that the golem of Prague was made from the mud of the river Vltava, and that the shards of said golem are residing in the attic of the Altneuschule or Old New Synagogue in Prague. Now, I've been into that synagogue, but I didn't get to the attic, so I don't know if it's still there. But let's hope it is if they ever need it again. And let's hope they don't ever need it again, because we don't want any more pogroms. Yeah, so very interesting concept. Okay, so that brings us neatly to Christian magic. Now, obviously, Christianity is allegedly or officially very down on the whole concept of magic. However, the Eucharist, you know, a lot of Christians believe that in the Eucharist, the bread and the wine are literally transubstantiated into the body and blood of Christ. So this means that anybody wanting to do magic in the medieval period is going to go, oh, I'm going to, when I'm given the communion bread, I will stick it under my tongue and carry it out of the church and use it for magic. So that was a very popular thing to do in the Middle Ages. Now, relics, so usually body parts or bits of clothing from saints, also believed to have miraculous powers. So miracles, magic, same thing. And they're also very keen on talismans and amulets like everybody else. So the obvious example being the St. Christopher medallion, for example. And another thing that's frequently practiced by Christians is bibliomancy, where you open up a book, usually the Bible. So you open the book at random, stick your finger on the page, and then whatever passage your finger lands on is the answer to your divinatory question. Another example, casting lots. So in the book of Acts in the Christian Bible, when after Judas had killed himself, they needed a new 12th disciple. So they cast lots amongst the various brethren that were there to see which one it was going to be. So that's an example of divination. And of course, the word divination means asking the divine. And so it doesn't just mean guessing, it means asking the gods. And of course, astrology, very popular amongst Christians back in the day, not so much these days. And of course, it is alleged that C.S. Lewis based the entire Narnia series on the 7 classical planets of astrology. It's a theory. And of course, tarot has lots of Christian imagery in it. So, oh yes, and you might be wondering what these interesting diagrams are on this page. So the one on the left is, as you can see, a pentagram. And in Christianity, the pentagram represents the 5 wounds of Christ.
Yes, okay, I see it.
Yeah, and it's the most prominent thing about the diagram. It also has lots of tau crosses all over it. So yeah, some kind of Christian necromancy. Who knew? And the thing on the right is the angel, a conjuration of the angel Gabriel, I think from about the 3rd century. And you might notice, if your eyes are very good or you've got a large computer screen, that it's got barbarous words on it as well. So quite exciting.
All right, now we move into Islamic magic, the final element in what we're building towards. Now, this bowl that's on the screen here, where's the mouse point? There it is, this bowl here. I find this fascinating. Unlike the Jewish one, which was used to trap spirits, this one was filled with water, and then the incantation or prayer was recited, and the water would become empowered with that energy. And then what do you think you did with it? You drank the spell, and you take it into yourself, and you become imbued with that power. Now, in Islamic magic was divided into 2 categories. One was the occult sciences, which were things like divination, astrology, the interpretation of dreams, and prophecy. And then there was magic itself as a category, which are things like black magic, the summoning of spirits or theurgy, and natural magic, which I'm guessing would be herbalism, potions, crystals, things like that. I'm not going to try to pronounce these words because I'd probably slaughter them. That's your homework. You can go home and do that. Okay, anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
Down to
Right,
medieval.
on to medieval magic. So the 3 key strands in medieval magic, apart from the aforementioned Egyptian inheritance, were Islamic magic, Christian magic, and Jewish magic. Not necessarily in that order. And one of the most beautiful things about the period in Spanish history when Spain was ruled by the Muslims was that there was a great tolerance of all the different religions. And so the Jewish mystics and the Muslim mystics and the Christian mystics could come together and discuss and share ideas and create a synthesis of all their ideas. And it was at this point that Kabbalah crosses over from Judaism into Christianity, and you start getting Kabbalah in a Christian context. So once again, we find ourselves noticing that the medieval magic includes talismans and amulets because it's perennially popular, and also astrology and tarot. They're also into invoking spirits and gods, and with the theurgy and also thaumaturgy, which are general magical operations. And obviously one of the most important things, most important texts in this period is the Key of Solomon, but they also had lots of other grimoires as well. And what we have here on the left is an illustration from the Key of Solomon. Now, if your eyes are good and your Italian is good, you might notice, or whatever, not sure if this is Italian or medieval French or what, but anyway, so we have a bolino, a bolin. We have a cutel bianco, white knife, a cutel nero, a black knife. We have a bastone, which would be a wand, a baton. We have dell'arte spade, and spada dell'arte, which would be the sword of the art. And finally, last but not least, we have a thing that's called an artano or an artavo, which we think is the possible origin of the word themi, or however you pronounce that, because nobody really knows. So you can see, obviously any Wiccans in the audience will be going, oh, I think I recognize these tools. It's when Gerald Gardner was sitting down and figuring out what tools he wanted for Wicca, he had a list of tons of different knives, and apparently, according to legend, Dorian Valiente kind of got him to pare down the list a bit and have a few less knives. But I think that Wiccans to this day are still like, knives.
I know a few.
Yes. So anyway, there we go. first written instance of something resembling the word Athame. Okay, oh, folk magic, this is me as well. So, folk magic, a lot of medieval magic was of a sort of high magic, trying to conjure spirits and penetrate the occult spheres of the universe and all that sort of stuff. Folk magic is very much focused on the practical day-to-day, right? How are we going to get the crops to grow? Will I have a baby? Will I meet a man or a woman? You know, can I get the wind to blow so I can sail my ship? And you know, who's cursed my crops this week? This week. Well, it's always someone different, isn't it? So to that end, we have things like divination tools. So we would have a pendulum here. Yeah, oh, there we are, one pendulum. We would have divining rods, talismans and amulets to protect you from malevolent magic and bring you luck. Now, not magic, this is an interesting one, because the witches, particularly in Scotland and I believe Cornwall, used to tie 3 knots in a string or a rope, and then they would tie the wind into those knots, and then they would sell the cord to the sailors, and then the sailor would, when the ship was becalmed, they would untie one of the knots, and then hopefully the sails would fill with wind and they would sail away. Then we have things like healing tools, and as I said, I believe that the single tine antler, here it is again, is a healing tool, and they've actually got a number of these in the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle. Last time I looked, they were labelled as bone pointers, but they are clearly single tine antlers. And we have the witch bottle. It's one I prepared earlier. There we go. And a witch bottle, there are 2 types of witch bottle. There's the one which has threads or pins or stuff like that in to distract the spirit. So the spirit just gets all besotted by the little bits of string and doesn't come and bother you because it's too busy following the threads. And the other kind is where you if you believe that you've been bewitched by someone, you get hold of some of their urine, unspecified how you do that, but there you go, and you put it in a bottle, and then you put it in your chimney and smoke it. And the idea of that is that it prevents them being able to go and relieve themselves, and then they get so frustrated at being unable to relieve themselves that they then release you from the bewitchment or the enchantment. This practice was still going on in the 1960s, 70s and 80s in Newfoundland, according to a book I read recently called Making Witches by Barbara Rietti. So yeah, if you find yourself, you know, having difficulty with in that area, then go look for the witch bottle, basically. And finally, we have apotropaic marks. Now, the word apotropaic means turning away harm. Apo to oh, hang on, yeah, oh, I don't know, I think apo is harm and tropeia is to turn. Anyway, so this picture here is a photo I took of the of some apotropaic marks in the tithe barn at Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire, and what you can see here is known as the flower of life. And basically it's the same function, is that the spirit gets distracted by following the lines and doesn't come and ruin your crops that you've got stored in the tithe barn. And if you go to Laycock in Wiltshire, there's another one. I've got a photo of that one as well, but this was a better photo. There's another one in the doorway of the tithe barn in Laycock as well. And this flower of life symbol is widely used in various different folk magic. They also have it in the Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic in like upper New York State and places like that. So
Okay, magical fraternities. Of course, we can't mention magical fraternities without mentioning the Masons. Not a secret society, but a society that has secrets. It is one of the longest surviving fraternities and dates back, as far as we know, from at least the mid-1300s, when trade guilds began to adopt mystical practices related to their trades. This was also during one of the Black Plague times, so everybody was very nervous and scared, and would bring in religious practices and magic to try to protect themselves. The masonry that we know today is the result of the 1717 formation of the United Grand Lodge of England, whose rituals became the template that Gerald Gardner used for creating much of the structural format of Wicca. It has ritual openings and closings, signs, tokens, and words, keys to recognition for other Masons, and 3 progressive degrees. And it has the working tools, though different ones, for the craft. It's also called the craft. So much of its learning is also experiential. And as such, it will not make sense. Things like this will not make sense to those who have not experienced these mysteries. Like looking at the image that's on the left of the screen here. I look at it and I see, okay, that's 1st degree there, that's 2nd degree there, that's 3rd degree there. I can remember the stories and everything else like that. When you look at it, what do you see?
I see 2 pillars, which I recognize from the High Priestess card and the tarot. I can see three pillars, and I wouldn't have realized what they were unless you told me yesterday. I saw the uncarved block, which is the Taoist name for that. It's actually, what's it called? The rough ashlar, that's right.
Yep.
I can see a coffin. I can see the sun and the moon and some stuff which looks vaguely Masonic. So, like, to Bob, this has a whole set of meanings, because there's an underlying story. To me, it's like some random stuff.
And the story is very simple, but I can't tell you because it's a secret. Where have I heard that before?
Oh, yeah.
And without, that's called a tracing board, and without the formation of this structure, a lot of what we know in modern magic wouldn't be as formalized.
That's true.
Oh yes, and it is a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. I said this must be an American thing because it says signs and symbols.
Yeah.
Because I know British and Canadian, which are very similar in many ways. So
yes.
Anyway,
there you go. That's
on to the next step.
Yes. So.
Oh, that's me again.
Yes.
Okay. Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, was founded in the late 1900s and went on to become one of the greatest influences in shaping 20th century Western occultism. It combined the big 3 again, Egyptian, Hebrew, and Christian mysticism, and adopted the Masonic use of the degree system, seeing as the 3 founders of the Golden Dawn were Freemasons.
And you can also see some Egyptian symbolism in there as well.
Yeah.
And the Rosicrucian as well.
So let's look at the working tools here. What do we have? Altar, circle, wand, cup, sword, pentacle. They look familiar, don't they? Very familiar. Their practices mixed esoteric philosophy with Kabbalah and taught members astrology, tarot reading, scrying, astral travel, alchemy, and many other magical practices. And without the Golden Dawn, most magical practices would not be what they are today.
So that brings us neatly to Wicca. I once joked that basically the potted history of occultism over the last couple of 100 years is, first of all, there were some Freemasons, and then some of them got bored and went and founded Druidry. Then there were some more Freemasons, and some of them got bored and went and founded the Golden Dawn. And then there were some more Freemasons who also got bored and went and founded Wicca. And the little bit more complicated than that, but it's a reasonably accurate overview. Anyway, so yeah, Wicca, the Wicca that we know and love. So you might recognize some of these tools from previous lists that we have shared. So each of these tools has its own symbolic function and also a practical function in the circle. So the sword for casting the circle, the athame for consecrating things, burin for using with herbs and candles and the like, and all the other tools that we use. And also the cauldron, the broom and the chalice, and we also have the altar. And of course, the Book of Shadows is a tool for recording your rituals and rituals that have been passed down to you. And you could argue that a statue is a tool for contacting the numinous.
Well, it's representative of
Yes,
a greater thing.
indeed. So,
Folkloric magic. Okay, now folkloric magic can also be referred to, folkloric witchcraft can also be referred to as traditional witchcraft. We're talking about the Cochrane tradition. We're talking about 1734, the clan of Tubal Cain, and American folkloric witchcraft. Now, as it developed separately from Wicca, it has some traditional tools which are the same, but others which are very different, with each tool having its own symbolic meaning. Now, the stang in the picture, there we go, over here, is the centerpiece of the circle, which is called the compass in traditional witchcraft. It represents both the horn god, you can probably see where, as well as the crossroads, where the arrows meet. And it can be used in place of an altar. It's often shod in iron and can be driven directly into the ground. The skull, which isn't shown here, is used for conjuring, while the cup, broom, and cauldron are have a similar use to their counterparts in Wicca. Now, as I said, the folkloric compass is used in place of the circle, and each quarter has an elemental weapon, seen on the screen here, assigned to its direction. I don't know how many of you have tried or practiced folkloric witchcraft. We did go to
we've been to some of their open rituals.
yes, it was fascinating seeing the differences.
Yes. Okay. So Druidry. Hello to the druids who are here. I know there's at least 3 of you, so hello. So Druidry, yes. So classical Druidry, you know, what little record we have of ancient Druidry would have had a wand. We know this because they used it as a symbol of peace. They would have had a staff. I can't think of a textual reference to that, but I just seems right. They would have had, we know they had the sickle for cutting the mistletoe off the oak tree. And here we have a slightly grumpy looking druid who's obviously got up very early in the morning.
No shoes.
Yeah, no shoes, looks like she's got a nightie on, and is looking a bit grumpy. So obviously hasn't had any coffee yet. And obviously Getafix, the only decent representation I could find of a male druid was Getafix here from the Asterix books, but who doesn't love Getafix? Now on the right here we have, some of you may have noticed that there's a rather splendid hashtag on Instagram at the moment called Regional Witch Challenge, where everybody's posting pictures of their tools and witchy stuff from their specific region, and it's fascinating. And this picture here is from a guy called Loxley who blogs at A Wise Fool, and as you can see he's got a cup and some sacred stones and a knife and a wallet and a wand and an antler tool. And the candle in the middle, and he explains what each of these are in his blog post. Well worth a read. But I just thought it'd be nice to share a modern druids ensemble. So there you go. But yeah, do check out that Regional Witch Challenge hashtag because it's fascinating. Okay.
All right. Heathenry and Asatru. I was corrected on the pronunciation of that earlier.
You were.
Asatru. Heathenry is more of a devotional and ceremonial practice because it follows the traditions of the Norse gods. For this reason, it has fewer tools and does not use as much magic. One important tool would be, here it is again, the hammer. Oh, that's heavy. which represents Thor. And it is used for hallowing couples at weddings. You would hold it up like that and hallow the couple, or it can be used for hallowing the horn of mead at a stumble.
Yes, got a horn and we got some mead.
What happened to all the
Hooray.
mead?
We drank it.
Oh, okay. And the horn. Yeah, and at the stumble, the boasts are given, and the gods, you toast to the gods and make them promises, things that you will follow through on. So the primary magical tool would have to be the runes, which are associated with Odin. They are used primarily or individually or in combination as magical symbols or as talisman, as well as for divination or prophecy. You put down the runes, you pull them, put them down in a specific pattern, similar to the way tarot is used.
Yeah. Okay. Conclusions.
Ah.
Yes.
So
So
you jumped to conclusions. Yeah.
So yeah, the conclusions we have reached. The more magical a tradition is, the more tools it has. So the more it's involved in magical procedures, I guess the more tools it actually needs. And then we noticed a difference between mystical magic, so the kind of magic that wants to, penetrate the occult mysteries of the universe, get into alternate spheres of existence, and try to understand the nature of the Godhead, so all very mystical, versus your everyday magic of making the crops grow, trying to ward off illness, hoping you don't starve or catch a nasty disease, or and trying to find out where that lost silver coin went,
Where my keys went.
where your keys went.
Yeah.
Probably down the back of the sofa.
Yeah.
So all the practical stuff versus the kind of highfalutin mystical stuff. And we've seen different traditions throughout this presentation having different focus on those two aspects.
Yeah, and the tools that would be used would be influenced, I'd say more than less, by the culture and environment that produced them. If you're from a warrior culture, chances are you're going to have a lot of swords and knives and pokey, pointy things and dangerous things. If you're from a very peaceful one, you're probably going to have staff, wands,
non-pointy things.
yeah, well, it'd still be pointy.
Yeah, but
Wands are
not
pointy.
as pointy.
Yeah, not as dangerous.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a desert environment, you're not going to have access to a lot of things. If you're in an Arctic environment, you're not going to have access to a lot of things. And we can trace the evolution of certain tools all the way through. You saw certain things that just sort of skipped from one culture to the next. Things like knives, of course. The cup is a practical item that everybody would have. Then amulets and talismans, they were in nearly every one of the cultures that we looked at. I'm sure if you looked at your magical tools, several of them would count as either an amulet or a talisman. And the wand is representative of the athame, or the sword, but it is more for peaceful purposes, or where a sword is not appropriate. And so these things developed through different traditions and brought to where we are today.
Yeah. So that was the quick overview of magical tools.
The potted history.
The whistle stop. Yes. So now for the plug, which you kindly did at the beginning. So Bob's YouTube channel, Lumiere CDN.
If you like Morris dancing, there's a lot of Morris dancing in there as well as gnomes.
Yeah.
That's more recent.
And also some our trip around Cornwall and Wales is on there as well.
With ancient stone circles.
Yeah. My YouTube channel goes under my name. Plenty of ranting about Wicca. My blog also has lots of ranting about Wicca, and of an inclusive nature, unsurprisingly. Instagram, Yvonne_Aburrow, and Idlewild_Morris is our Morris Instagram page.
It's fairly new. There's not that much on it yet.
Yeah. That's because of the lockdown. We were just about to start Morris dancing, and then the lockdown happened.
So we can do it in the living room.
Yeah. Okay, and the books available from the Doreen Valiente Foundation shop, and if you buy them from there, you help the Doreen Valiente Foundation, so that's good, because you'd rather help the DVF than help Amazon, I'm sure. There is a chapter on magical tools in Dark Mirror, so check it out. And finally, any questions?
Yeah, we've got one from Alison Beer saying that she'd like to know more about swords.
Swords.
Oh, swords. Okay, who wants to handle this one?
Swords. Well,
Sword is one of the oldest weapons around
Yeah.
after stone knives, because they used to, well, they'd fashion flint, they'd nap it and put it on the end. Well, that'd be more of a
that would be
spear,
a spear, yeah.
and then it
I don't.
developed.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can really make swords until you get to the Bronze Age, because you need metal to make swords.
And they were always buried with people, so you know that if it was a person of high importance in the community, they'd be buried with their sword because it was that important to them.
Yeah.
Because at that time,
Very
it took
valuable.
an artisan or a special skills to be able to create
Yeah.
them.
So from a magical point of view, so I always see it as the athame is the will of the individual. So that, that's your athame, it's your personal athame, and it represents your individual will. Whereas a sword is like the group will of the whole coven, because you typically have one sword per coven, unless you're obsessed with knives, and so it's like the group will of the coven, because there's that tradition that when the high priestess straps on the sword, she's then in charge of everything, and there's the tradition that Joan of Arc is said to have strapped on the sword, and that allegedly she was a witch. Anything else? Can you be more specific?
We got a question from Marco Scala saying, is a Japanese katana okay for opening the circle?
I don't know, I'd have to ask a Japanese person.
Basically a samurai sword.
Yes.
I think you'd have to ask a Japanese person that question.
Yeah. On my own martial arts experience, I would say probably it's not the best tool to use.
If it has a personal connection with you, I mean, if you're a martial arts student, if you learn with respect and immerse yourself in that culture.
Yeah, but it's still transferring it from another culture into this one. I think, and also I mean, I've got a, I'm very sort of like, if you really want to have an athame that doesn't have a black handle or something like that, I'm fine with that. But I always say your magical tools should never have been used to kill someone.
Yeah.
So if said sword had ever been used to kill someone, then I wouldn't be using it to cast a circle personally. I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, it's just personal preference on my part.
Just to make reference back to that, going from my own sort of ninjutsu training, the katana, especially if it's an old one, will have cut a human being, because that was part of the cutting test. You cut through sheaves of bamboo, which had to be cut through at one strike, and the final tempering was bisecting a human being. So an old one, you wouldn't really want in the circle.
No. Yeah, because it was basically a cavalry sword, wasn't it? So you just kind of drop it on the poor unfortunate person from above.
Yeah, the cutting test was a convicted prisoner.
Oh. Still not nice. Anyway.
Especially for the prisoner.
Yeah, indeed. But different strokes for different folks and all that. But I wouldn't. I'm always a bit wary of, it's very difficult to take something that has a completely different cultural context and try to shoehorn it into Western practice, whatever that happens to be. And that is my primary argument against cultural appropriation of all kinds, that it's like trying to take an analog part from an analog thing and trying to bolt it into a digital thing. It's not going to work.
Okay, we've got a question from Linda Haggerston saying, could you say something about the Hamsa, the palm of hand amulet,
Oh yeah.
especially as it relates to the magic and healing practices of desert cultures?
Well, I can tell you everything I know about the hamster, which I could write on the back of an envelope, which is that it's the hand of Fatima.
Yes.
And I forget who Fatima was in relation to the prophet, but that's it. Sorry, that's all I know.
Okay. And from Susan Morris, how do you use the antler for healing? Is it for cutting out?
Right. No. So the way I use it is I take so you've got like a little minor chakra on the palm of your hand, right? So I put the antler, so you can see that, I put it into the palm of my hand, and then I start transmitting energy out of said chakra. And then what happens is when you touch it to somebody else's hand, like so, the energy is then released into the other person. Well, that I do not know how they were used in the past, but having played around, having found this in the wild, lying around, and taken it home and then cleaned it up and then had a play with it, that's how I've developed my use of it.
Claudia Imazel has noted that Fatima was actually Muhammad's daughter.
Oh, thank you.
And the Hebrew equivalent is the hand of Miriam.
Oh.
However, the hand symbol to ward off evil predates Islam by many centuries.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. From David DeHay. In the tarot, does the suit of pentacles trace back to a magical tool? Is it a coin with the symbol of the 5 rooms that were referenced earlier?
Ooh. Good question. Well, so yeah, there is the magical tool of the pentacle in Wicca, and also the paten in Christianity, which is like the plate that you put the communion bread on. So I think that coins, because gold is dug up out of the earth, then coins are a sort of obvious choice for representing earth, and also
earth
because
represent
they're
wealth.
material.
Yes,
material and material wealth. I don't actually know how far the depiction of the coins with a pentagram on, how far that goes back, because I don't know enough about the tarot to know that. But I think some of the earliest earliest tarot cards didn't necessarily have pentagrams on them, and obviously the pentagram is a very ancient symbol, so it predates Christianity as well as predating modern paganism. So don't know. I think you'd have to look back trace back into the history of the tarot and see where that symbol first appears.
Yeah. Linda Haggerston asked, excuse me, are there any thoughts on tools for numerology?
Tools in numerology. Well, that's an interesting one. I suppose people could use, if you were getting really complicated with numerology, because you've got to add big numbers together, then you might use an abacus, but then that would be a practical tool rather than a magical tool.
It's more of a mental.
Well, so the numbers just represent, I suppose people might have made, people did make amulets with angelic sigils on, and that involves numerology. So there you've got a magical tool derived with numerological symbolism attached to it.
Yeah. Okay, and Linda also noted that it's said that the best hamsa are made from the sand where the maker lived and worked.
Oh, neat. I've seen those little metal ones you can get, the sort of filigree.
Yeah, that's the hand of Fatima.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Morocco back in the early 80s, and I bought something from a vendor, and he said, "I am out of coins here," and he gave me one as part of my change. I still have it around here somewhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you found it the
But
other day.
the chain fell off,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't appear that we've got any further questions. Oh, Linda says, carry sandstone, hang metal plaques on homes.
There you go.
Okay, unless we get any other questions. And it doesn't look like we have.
Yeah.
On behalf of us all,
Oh, there we go.
Bob, Yvonne, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
As usual, it's been most enlightening, and there's a sizable amount of applause going on there. Although everybody's muted, so you can't actually hear anything. It just looks like we're begging for fish.